You know, it's a story so many of us know. It almost feels like a modern myth. A brilliant young man, Christopher McCandless, just ditches his old life, burns his cash, and heads into the Alaskan wilderness to find something purer. It's this powerful, romantic idea of escape and finding yourself. But over the years, other truths about this story have started to surface. Truths about why he really left, how he actually died, and the complicated legacy he left behind. So let's dig in and explore the competing truths behind the legend of Into the Wild.
I mean, this is what he actually scrawled on a piece of wood inside that abandoned bus where he lived. This right here, this is his Declaration of Independence. It's the version of the story that's inspired so many people, right? This pure, philosophical quest to escape the toxicity of modern life. It's a really powerful idea. But is it the whole story?
Or was something else going on? The deeper you look into the story of Chris McCandless, the more you realize that this simple narrative, the escape from civilization, is really just the tip of the iceberg. The truth, it turns out, is way more complex. It's tangled up in family secrets, hard science, and, well, the power of a good story.
So let's start with the big question. Why? Why would a young guy with a super bright future feel the need to just completely vanish? You know, the common answer is that he was rejecting materialism and all the pressures of society. But his sister, Corinne, she gives us a much darker, much more personal reason. And this quote, this is where a crucial voice finally enters the story. For years, pretty much all we knew about Chris's family life was what he let slip to people he met on the road. But his sister, Corinne, who was also his best friend, she knew the real story.
So in her book, The Wild Truth, Corinne reveals something huge. Chris wasn't just running from some philosophical idea of civilization. No, he was running from a very real and very painful home life. She talks about this secret reality of domestic violence and a deeply dysfunctional family. And get this, when Jon Krakauer was writing Into the Wild, Corinne actually asked him to leave these details out to protect their parents. So what this tells us is that his journey into the wild was maybe less about rejecting society and a whole lot more about escaping trauma.
Okay, so the why of his journey is really complex, but it turns out the how of his death is just as complicated. For more than 20 years, people argued about the cause. Was it just starvation, a dumb mistake, or was it something more insidious? It actually became a genuine scientific mystery.
And this investigation, it literally unfolded over 2 decades. McCandless himself, in his journal, blamed the seeds of the Eskimo potato plant. But then early tests back in '96 found nothing toxic. So Krakauer, the author, he theorized, well, maybe it was a mold on the seeds. It wasn't until 2013 that researchers really started digging into different kinds of toxins, first one called ODAP, and then finally, they landed on the real culprit.
And here it is, L-canavinine. The stuff is nasty. Think of it like a metabolic imposter. It basically tricks your body into thinking it's a useful building block, but what it actually does is jam up your essential metabolic processes. It's like the seed's ultimate defense mechanism to keep animals from eating it.
And this is where it all clicks into place with Chris. His last coherent journal entry read, "Extremely weak, much trouble just to stand up." The symptoms of this L-canavinine poisoning, especially when someone is already malnourished, they match his description perfectly. It slowly paralyzes you. So he wasn't just starving, he was being actively poisoned by the very food he thought was keeping him alive. Just a tragic and really an unavoidable mistake.
Now, let's talk about the other main character in the story, the bus. It's become this iconic symbol, right? The magic bus. But its real history is, well, it's a lot more practical and way less magical than that nickname would have you believe.
So this bus wasn't some mystical discovery out in the middle of nowhere. It was just old work equipment. Back in 1961, a construction company dragged it out to the Stampede Trail to house their workers. Then a wheel broke, and they just left it there. For decades after that, it was just a practical, kind of grimy shelter for local moose hunters, a place to get out of the rain.
I absolutely love this little anecdote. It comes from a guy whose dad used the bus as a family hunting camp for years, long before McCandless ever showed up. It just grounds the bus in this real, lived-in history. This wasn't some sacred space. It was a place where dads made dumb mistakes with gasoline and families processed their moose meat. But then, after Into the Wild came out, the bus totally transformed. It became a shrine, and a really dangerous one. So many people tried to make this pilgrimage to see it, and a lot of them were completely unprepared that rescues became common. Some people even died trying to get there.
Finally, in 2020, the state of Alaska just said enough and airlifted the bus out of there because the public safety hazard was just too great.
So all of this complex picture of his motivations, his death, and even the shelter he found, it brings us to his legacy. Because even 30 years later, Christopher McCandless is an incredibly polarizing figure. Was he a courageous idealist or just a naive fool?
In the debate, really, it all boils down to this. On one side, you've got people who see an inspiring truth seeker, a kind of modern-day pilgrim, who had the guts to actually live by his ideals. And on the other side, you've got the critics, especially a lot of Alaskans, who see an arrogant and selfish young man who is dangerously naive and showed a total lack of respect for the power of the wilderness.
This comment from a Reddit user, man, it really captures that Alaskan perspective perfectly. The frustration isn't just with McCandless himself. It's with the legacy of dangerous copycat behavior that his romanticized story inspired, which put local search and rescue teams at risk year after year.
And yet, for so many others, his story represents something deeply aspirational. This comment gets that feeling just right. The courage to break free from a life that feels like it was designed by someone else, to find your own path. For these people, his journey, even with its tragic ending, is this powerful symbol of freedom.
So why? Why is his story so powerful and so polarizing? Well, a huge piece of the answer lies with the storyteller. Jon Krakauer himself admits he wasn't exactly an impartial biographer. Academic analyses have pointed out that he deliberately framed the story in a very romantic way, comparing Chris to figures like Thoreau. He did this to defend him from criticism and to elevate his story from just a simple tragedy to something more meaningful, the journey of a pilgrim.
At the end of the day, the story of Chris McCandless is kind of a mirror. He went out searching for truth, but what we see in his journey, whether it's inspiration or arrogance, courage or foolishness, that says just as much about our own values, our own fears, and our own deep down desires for a meaningful life as it does about the young man who called himself Alexander Supertramp.